Yeah, okay. I call it figuring it out on the fly because it's been an experiment the whole way through this. And there's Strong in the winter, which hopefully mine will look something like that. Okay. I don't think I might have shared track plan stuff on one of the Gmail groups or something. But this first slide here, that's the west end of the yard, and then the east end of the yard is this way, and you'll see that rate going around to the right. That's a 19-inch radius, and that'll be heading into the module to the right for Farmington. And then this is the central part of the yard. So that left track where it goes out of the slide, that heads over to Valley Brook Trestle, and that's what that gully shot was. That's at the end. Um, the track plan is pretty much the way it really was. It's just compressed from east to west down into this little section right here because that's the space I've got for it, and it's enough to be able to switch more or less the way they did. And the biggest difference here is if you see the tracks going up along the backdrop there, that would be the track, the F&M track that'd be heading off towards Kingfield, which in real life it would have headed off to the left instead of the right. But what I'm using that for is kind of a staging track. And during an operating session, hopefully in the future, I'll have probably a small passenger train and then a small combined train, a mixed behind it that'll come in as they're required on the layout, and then trains heading off to Kingfield will go up there and head off behind the scenery and then stop. So I get a little bit more mileage out of this section of the layout by being able to have something going to and coming from Kingfield. And anybody, if you got questions, just ask up. And like I usually do, I'm just putting structures in place to figure out how much I've got to work with. Yeah, what? Go ahead.
No, you're good, Dan. No one asked any
Oh,
questions.
all right. So, this is the usual way I start once I've got the track plan figured out. And then I lay the court road bed, and after that, then I start building the scenery. And you see, there's a little bit of the track off on that left-hand side there. That pink foam, that's hills behind the Forster toothpick mill, and then it disappears off the hills there that you see that have the plaster on them already. And I just build that up with pink foam, carve it to the rough shape I need it, and then I coat it with plaster cloth. All right. So there's obviously the depot and the freight shed and the creamery behind it. What I try to figure out at this point is what I'm going to be able to fit into the scene, because I want as much from that, iconic scene there, right there at the yard as I can, and I also want as much industry as I can, for switching operations and making up consists and whatnot. And if you look on there, you'll see that the background scenery, the backdrop, I made it a cloudy day because it's obviously shadowed when they took the pictures for this backdrop because the snow is kind of a grayish color. So I'm trying to make everything look like it's an overcast day. And the stuff that okay, like you see that one structure there, the barn-like structure. You see that? Have I still
Yes.
got you?
Yep.
Okay, all right. That's actually one of Bob Hayden's structures that was off his second Carabasset and Dead River layout, and I got it off a guy on eBay. He signed it. He made that one in '77, and I've been waiting to put it into something that I'm building, and I finally figured out, hey, that'd be perfect for the apple canning plant. but it was too long. The building was too deep, so I actually had to cut off about a third of the building to get it to fit, and I hated that, right? But it is what it is. Now the stuff that I've coated on there, the white stuff, that's on top of the plaster cloth, and that is. Let me see if I've got it on the next slide here. Let's see. I don't know if I can go backwards. Okay, I'm going to go forward a little bit here. This is the stuff that I'm using to make the snow for the big areas. And this is a recipe that was uh, Dave Frary calls it snow goop, I think is what he calls it. And you mix it, and if you look at that jar there, it's perfect for mixing this stuff because it's got the gradations in
Mm.
ounces. And so I can measure it as I pour it in to make sure it's the right amount without having to use measuring cups or anything like that. And it's you use premium acrylic snow titanium white acrylic paint, and then Liquitex basic acrylics matte fluid medium. Now he used gloss fluid medium, and that's what you see in the picture. My first batch was gloss fluid medium. But for the next batch, I'm switching to matte fluid medium because you get this horrendous shine on the snow. And I don't know how he controls it when he takes pictures, but I mean, it's like, when you like take a picture into a mirror and you get a big blob of white, flash or whatever. So it's better going with the matte, in my opinion. And then it's got let's see, impasto clear gel acrylic medium and cerulean blue acrylic paint, and that's what you use to mix this stuff. Now he said that you add the blue because it makes it look more white, and I was kind of skeptical, but he's right. And I actually ended up adding more of the blue in there so that it blends better. If you look to the right of that structure, that's with the cerulean blue in the snow on the 3D. And then you can see that it's grayer on the photo backdrop behind it. When it was just plain white, it clashes so much, it doesn't look right. So I ended up adding even more cerulean blue to try to make it look better. And I'm going to talk about color blending a little bit later. All right, so let's see. All right, we already put that one in there, and that's obviously the engine house, and the roundhouse will be going in there in the front of it. Now this stuff here, um, if you've ever worked with floral foam, you get it at Hobby Lobby or wherever, and they use it for sticking fake flowers in it and whatnot. There's two different grades of this stuff. There's a fine grade and there's kind of a rough grade. The rough grade, I tried using it because I thought it was going to be easy to form it, and it's actually not. So I got the fine grade stuff, which is what you see in this picture. And it's such a soft product. You have to be careful because all you got to do is lay something down or put your hand on the layout while you're working and stick your hand in it, and it'll make a crater in it. It's really soft, but that also makes it really easy to shape. So that's what I use for the snow piles in between the tracks. For the road, it's Norton Hill Road now. It used to be Depot Street. Behind it, because trying to figure out how to make this look right, and I'm going back off memory when I was a kid. Wherever you plow, there's piles to the sides of it. And usually it's dirty piles. And there, I will be doing some of that, making it look a little dirty where the snow plows have been going up and down the tracks, but not too much. But this stuff works great. Once you've got a shell on it, whether you're putting on acrylic paint or whatever over it, once you got a shell on it, it stiffens it up a lot, so you don't have to worry about damaging it. And so, like you'll see here, this is where I'm building up areas that have snowbanks around it, because everything, it's easy when you're doing summer or spring or fall or whatever, because everything's laid on top of the ground. But in the wintertime, there are sometimes several feet of snow that are built up above the ground. So you have to build up the scenery around the tracks and around the buildings to make it look like the snow's been dug away from all the areas that you're operating in. Is everybody still got me?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Just making sure. So you can see where I'm building up that green stuff. And right here, you can see where there's green stuff is painted in front of the building where the snow bankments are along the tracks. And that's just got a coat of acrylic over it to give it a little bit of a shell. And then the areas around the building where they've shoveled snow away, where it's fallen off the roof and all of that, that makes piles, and they're clumpy piles. They're not like pure white, soft virgin snow. It never looks like that. So let's see. Okay, here's a good example here. If you look along the tracks, you'll see where there's piles of snow. And I darkened up the photos some, the contrast, so that you can see the detail better. So it looks kind of dark there, but it doesn't. If I don't darken the contrast, you can't see the detail that I'm trying to show. So, like over to the upper right, you'll see there's some pretty high piles of snow. That's the depot parking area, and they would have plowed all of that up or shoveled it up into big piles along the edges. And then let's see here. Okay, now this was a challenge. If you look at the track, I took this picture where you could see where the track is just laid and there's nothing on it, like unballasted. And then if you look below it, you see where the snow has been plowed by the snow plows. So what I did to get that plowed effect, first thing I took an actual I think it's 513 or whatever, one of my snow plows, and wherever I put uh, plowed areas on the track, I ran that down the track and made sure that I had clearance of the plow on both sides, which is the way it would have been plowed, to make
Right.
sure there's clearance for everything. And then I take it's Woodland Scenic Snowflake snow, and then I use that just like ballast to get the snow in between the rails and on the outsides of the rails where it's been plowed and flanged. Now, the problem that I ran into with the snowflake stuff, the Woodland Scenic stuff, when you put it on the glue or whatever you're using to nail it down with, it makes it translucent. It doesn't show white like it does when it's in the container. It ends up being a kind of a translucent color, and you can see the ties. So what I did was I laid some ballast, laid some of the snowflake like ballast, and then did the eyedropper with the wet water, and then did the diluted matte medium to glue it down. And then I put a coat of paint over it and then put another layer of it over because it settles too. When you get the snow powder wet, it settles down in. It doesn't stay up like ballast does. Um, and after that second coat of the snowflake powder, ballasting with it, it looked a lot better where you couldn't see the ties. It didn't look like it was some kind of weird translucent plastic stuff. And then what I did on top of that was I took cerulean blue and put it in with diluted matte medium, and then dropped that on top of the snow again, so that I had the same color on the tracks as I did on the snow with Dave Frary's snow goop mix. So the colors all blend together because any difference in shades of white, it shows up like with a sore thumb. That's one of the things I've been learning by working on a winter scene. Um, it's it's a real tricky process trying to get all of these shades of white blending together where it looks natural and not fake. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's
Yeah, I
pretty
would think that
tricky.
that's a hard thing to do to get all the snow and everything to have a nice look, not be overly just white, but not to have, you want to be able to see
Yeah.
some contrast, but you don't want to pull out too much. So it's interesting. I mean, I don't know anyone who's tried to model a town in snow. That's a pretty rare choice. A lot of people do snow scenes where they just run one train through a scene, or they just have one track going through a scene, maybe a depot or something, but it's usually not a town. I have to admire your efforts here and to actually have a town that you want to operate for operations and with turntable. That'll be neat to see how this progresses for you.
Yeah, this has been on the whole layout. Trying to get this right has been the toughest thing that I've done so far. You know, and after a while, because I worked on it for I don't know a few weeks, and then took a break and then worked on it a little more, and then I just kind of walked away from it for a few months and worked on my sailboat, just to kind of ponder and think about it and let it sit for a while, so that when I come back, I can look at it fresh. Um, and so I know where I need to go from here. And there's the okay, like if in the picture that you're looking at, when you look at the road, which would have been Depot Street's Norton Hill Road now, to the left of the tracks, and then you see the hill off to the left of that. Um, the the upper part of the hill to the far left, upper left corner, that's pretty smooth because that's Dave's uh, snow goop mix. And
Okay.
then toward the road, you see it looks rougher because I had to fill in some of the area there to make the contour right with celluclay. And I've sanded that area down with 60 grit and 120 grit, trying to get it smooth like the snow goop, and it's just impossible. I'm going to have to go over that with snow goop too to make it smoother. But the snow goop's a challenge to work with too because it's 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 kind of like mayonnaise. The consistency of it is that's the closest thing I could call it. It'd be mayonnaise. And when you spread it on, it spreads on like frosting, and you can see like the spatula marks where you've been spreading it. That shows up. And the only way you can get rid of that, he suggested spraying it with a little bit of wet water. But it's not a little bit. You gotta really plaster that stuff with wet water to try to get rid of all those marks from the spatula. It's not easy to work with. It seems like it would be, but it's not.
That part with the cellular clay, it actually just looks like a plow came through on that road at a high speed and pushed the snow back
Well,
to
and
me.
and that's exactly right. But the problem is what I'm trying to model is this was before they had snow plows. They had horse teams with snow rollers. These big giant cylinders made out of wood on a huge axle, and
Oh
they would
yeah,
take like 4 horse teams, and they would pack down the roads so that the sleighs could get over them. Because that's
yeah.
what
So
they were
there,
doing.
yeah, so there was none of this kind of big cascade of snow from a snowplow going by at 35. I hear
So
you.
for plowed areas, the plows come over your yard and shovel out the driveway, and now you got to shovel it out again. Um, but it's supposed to be snow rolled, so that's another challenge. There's a lot of challenges. And here's the materials that I'm working with for the vegetation, and everything is a fall color. Dead grass, dead bushes, browns, yellows, like faint yellows, kind of a beige color. Um, and
Yeah. Yeah. And you can use a lot of this stuff sort of seeping through the snow.
Yeah.
so so that's faux fur. That fake fur you get at Joann's Fabrics or whatever your
Right.
craft store, whatever. So and I started with a kind of a beige color, and then I brushed it with a brush with some khaki acrylic paint, and then combed it with a comb, and then blew dry it and stuff, till I got it the way I liked the look of it. And whoops. and added some, if you look around the faux fur, that's just ground up dead leaves from the backyard. And then I added in some tufts
That
and
looks really good, blending with your backdrop quite well.
yeah, I love blending my backdrops with my 3D scenery to make it look more deep, you know. And so that's come out pretty good. So I've done some more of that, and then I put a sprinkling of the snow powder on top of the foliage once the foliage is dry, and just hairspray it, you know, to keep it in place. And then the next thing was trying to figure out the structures, right? So you'll see I made a couple of cardboard stand-ins, and I've got a couple of generic kid houses up on the hill behind the depot there, trying to figure out what I got to work with for space and if I can make it look right, you know, because I want my industries too. And that's from the front.
Nice.
Okay. And so now it's time to start making some scratch built buildings. And what I always do is I'll figure out how much room I got to work with, because those stand-in buildings, the dimensions are terrible. But the thing is I got to figure out what's going to work right. So I make the stand-in buildings out of cardboard and go, okay, I got to make the peak of the roof on that lower, and I've got to make that wing on the mill longer, that kind of thing. So once I've figured out from that, then I know what I want to do to actually make the structures. And what I always do is I just draw out with some drafting tools. You know, I'll draw out on white paper the facades, the sides, whatever of the building, and then I'll use because I use a lot of grant line castings for windows and doors and stuff. So I'll measure the back side of the casting, like the window. You know, you've got the recessed part that goes into the wall, and then you've got the window frame that extends around it. So I measure that back part where the hole needs to be, draw all those out, and then I put it on, like in this case, clapboard. It's evergreen clapboard. I tape the template on top of the clapboard, and then just use a straight edge and an X-Acto number 11 and cut out all of the holes and whatnot where the windows are going to be. And then once I have the walls cut out, then I'll paint them and weather them, you know, do a gray wash on them and dry brush them with some white and all of that. And I paint all the windows separately and weather those, and then I glue those into the wall. And that's what it comes out like after I'm done working on the building. And that's just a very small part of the Forster toothpick mill. But the thing is that's what it looks like in the back. You know, it's pretty crude, right? But that's actually that. If you look where there's the two roof vents, that's up against the photo backdrop, you know? So that building is in an area that goes from the photo backdrop only to about 4 inches away from the photo backdrop. So it's not much of the building, but when you add it in there, you know, that's all you're going to see anyway, you know, is that part of the building, because when you're operating the layout, you wouldn't see the rest of the factory anyway. And that gets an industry into an area where I hardly have any room for a full building, you know. And I did the same thing for the Daggett and Will store there. That's another scratch built building. And all of these buildings that are on the layout, they're going to have snow on the roofs, like partial snow, so you can still see some of the roof. Like, you know, it's been melting for a little while, and the icicles will be coming down and all of that. So, what's that? So, okay. I thought I heard something. I thought there was a question. All right. So there's the house on the hill, you know, and that's, I can tell you a lot of things. There should be like a bay window outcropping on that left side and another gable up on the roof with a window in it. But again, I'm trying to, once it's in there, it's just backdrop, scenery, and it looks a lot better than just putting in a generic kit, you know, because that's a very recognizable building. Well, most people wouldn't know the details of it, but when they see it, they know it, you know? So at least it looks like what it's supposed to.
I think one of the big keys is the stone wall down below. When you showed a
Oh, yeah.
different photo, the fact that you had those stone walls back
Here
a
we
little
go.
ways, yeah, I mean, it just,
Yeah.
that's an
Yeah,
important
there is.
aspect as much
I
as
don't know if you,
anything.
hmm yeah, I don't know if you ever been up there, but there is a stone wall there.
Yeah,
This is the last slide. This is Valley Brook Trestle will be in there. I've already got the track across, but I haven't put the uh, the bridge in. But that'll be in there. And this is the transition point where I go from late fall to the left, and as you go to the right over the trestle, the snow starts. And it's light snow here. You can see there's a little light snow on the left side of the bank, and then it increases as you go to the right. And then outside of this picture, just to the right, is where the creamery is. So it's a transition point, you know. And then I use it as a scenery block, you know, where so when you're looking at one scenery, you're drawn into that scenery, and then there's a break between that scene and then the scene to the left or right. And usually, you know, you use trees and forests and stuff to do that, or a hill or whatever. Um, but there will be, if you look on the right side there, I've already got some trees in there already on the layout. So there'll be trees with snow on them on the right hand side that kind of block the view of Strong to the right. So you won't see a full blown winter scene until you move to the right. And then on the east side of Strong, where you're heading for Farmington, there'll be another forest with some large pines where the snow is kind of fading out. And then you get to spring on the other side of the trees. So I'm going to be modeling spring in Farmington. So I'll have all four seasons in one layout because that was one of my goals for this thing. I've got summer up in Rangeley where the resort is, the Rangeley Lake House, so that I could have a good summer scene with all of the people out doing their activities and boats and all of that. And then it transitions through Reed Station down to Phillips from early fall to late fall, and then from Phillips to Avon, it goes to late fall, and then transitions at Valley Brook Trestle from late fall to winter, and then it'll transition to the mud season before you get to Farmington, and then full blown spring in Farmington. So let's see, and I think that's it.
Hey, Dan,
Yeah.
your backdrops look really good. What are
Oh,
they? How are you doing them?
this one, I'd have to look up where I got this one. Um, hmm. I'd have to look on my website because on the website where I'm doing my documenting everything, I mentioned where I got the backdrop. But yeah, it was a winter scene, and it looked very New Englandy. I don't remember if it's supposed to be New England or not, but it looks a lot like where I come from in Maine.
Yeah.
And then it had a blue, just a generic blue sky behind it.
Yeah.
And I cut it away at the tops of the trees, you know, cut away the blue. And then I took the that's masonite that I use for the backdrops, and I cove it into the corners, you know, so it's rounded. There's no square corners in the layout.
All right.
But I just took spray paint, and I took a piece of cardboard and just kind of cut it in Mickey Mouse ear sort of shapes, and used a couple of different shades of gray, and sprayed it to look like a cloudy, stormy day, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and that helps add to the feeling of that scene. You know, it's
Right.
an overcast, winter, cold day in Maine. You got to do the turntable and whatnot. I'm looking for kind of an overall. All right. If you see you see the scene there with the engine house on it.
yes,
Okay, I've got all the basic scenery done from Porter Brook all the way over to right there where the corner of the fascia is,
right,
and then where you see on the other side of the Ryobi drill where that coffee cup is, that's where the corn canning house is going to be going. That's the next one that I got a scratch build, and that'll be an abbreviated version of it too. So that's the last structure that I have to build, and that'll be going in. Once I've got that last structure done, then I'll be finishing up the rest of the snow. Then I'll be detailing the scenes, adding in people and more trees and, you know, vehicles and all that kind of stuff. So the main thing left is the corn house, the turntable, and I've got a kit for the turntable. It's one of the Gallus turntable kits. A couple of different guys made them.
Yep.
And I've got two of them on hand. I got to build one of them and put it in there because all my other turntables are modified Atlas turntables so far. This will be the first kit built turntable that I got. But yeah, I would say I'm probably 3/4 of the way done with it. And I'll be updating, you know, my website as I go. When I document things, I add them to the website. And I just finished up, let's see, the two houses on the hill there. Where are we at? Okay, I just finished up that house on the right. That's a kit bash. That was a back room, that outcropping on the side there. That was a back room on the back of it. I moved it to the side, added some steps. I added the porch with Grant Line stuff, the rails and the columns and the lattice work underneath. And that set of steps is from, I think, Norman Bates' house. I think the kit for Norman Bates' house. But yeah, I just finished those two up, so those are done. Other than that, I got to put a door on the house on the hill there. It's painted and weathered. I just have to add it on.
Right.
Yeah, but I've got one more major structure to do in the turntable, and then it'll be pretty much finishing everything up, adding super details.